It's a little after 1 o'clock here in San Francisco. Welcome to Studio B. My trusty co-host is here, Julia Vedekint, the Commodore of the Beach Street Yacht Club.
Yes.
Are you well today? Did you get a good night's sleep? This is going to be an exciting show and a challenging one when we have Mr. Dr. Andrew McIrvine, not McIrvine, standing by in London. We're going to do an AMA with Andrew, and that's Ask Me Anything.
Terrific.
So we can not only get an update on COVID, but we can also get an update on the Maxi world, the offshore world, and anything else you bloody well want to talk about today on our show number 610 for Tuesday, the 18th of April. I'm wearing a Stag Cruise shirt in Andrew's honor. I met him years ago at a Stag Cruise up St. Francis Yacht Club's retreat up in the Delta. And then we were lucky enough to have him again last year at the Stag Cruise. So we're going to bring him right away as a co-host. In fact, why don't we do that, Julia, right now? Because I got this nice picture that we used in the promo. Andrew looking like the international man of mystery that he and a few of other of our FOSI are. And also the proud grandpa. He says, not only am I the IMA Secretary General and a FOSI, but I am very proud of my grandson, Larry. We are great friends. Please welcome to the show live from London, Andrew McIrvine. Hello, Mr. Dr. McIrvine.
Hello. Very nice to be here.
Nice to have you back. You must have been on by now. We'd have to ask Clark Chapin, 6 or 7 times, something like that.
Quite a lot.
Yes, but each really good.
Say again, Julia?
Each of them have been really good.
Each of them been fantastic. I got to get you lean towards your left, Julia. You're out of frame. And there you go. That's better. Much better. Okay, that looks pretty good. We barely got ourselves on the air today with lots going on. But just to recap, since the last show, nice to have Andrew on as sort of a co-host right from the top of the show. Andrew, do you celebrate Orthodox Easter?
No. We celebrate Easter usually the same time as you do. And it's nearly always, it is always a regatta in Cowes, which is usually very cold or very windy. In fact, it was quite pleasant for the first 2 days this year. So it's often the first race of the season.
Well, last weekend was the Orthodox Easter, and I didn't realize how many.
It's a week different.
Yeah, it is. It's a couple weeks difference depending. Apparently, the Orthodox Church goes on the old Julian calendar instead of the Gregorian calendar, so it's a different thing for them. But belated happy blessed Easter to any of you celebrating it. Now, Julia and Andrew, I ask you this. Do you know what that is?
Yes.
What is it?
It's an Easter cake.
An Easter cake? And what's in it?
Eggs,
what are those red things?
The colored hard-boiled eggs.
Correct. And I ran that on my Facebook page the other day, having no idea that we had so many people who were either raised, not even non-Greek, but were raised in the Orthodox Church or celebrated Orthodox Easter. That is called, do you know how you pronounce that word?
Probably not.
Andrew? Is that? Soreki. That's what I thought too. Greek Easter bread is a sweeter brioche-like bread that is enriched with eggs and butter, ingredients that are forbidden during the 48-day long Lenten season. I thought it was Sareki too, but guess what? It's not. And how do I know?
Because you asked.
Tureki. Tureki.
It's Tureki.
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 Okay, so you see, we learn something new here every day. And I do want to say thanks to the various people sending comments about they having been raised in the Greek church, in the Orthodox Church, and other countries that celebrate it. Julia, do you know what day it is here in the U.S. of A? Here's a clue right there on your screen. I don't want you kids listening to a lot of adult language, so I'm turning up the TV until your dad
finishes our taxes.
Exactly.
Yes.
Finishes the taxes. It is tax day here in the U.S. It's normally on the 15th, but today it's on the 18th. Do you know why?
COVID's.
That was in previous years, not COVID. It's because 15th was Saturday.
Uh-huh.
And for some people, Easter Monday, even on the Orthodox, so they gave everybody until Tuesday. Did you file your taxes in time?
No.
Andrew, when do you file your taxes?
By the end of January.
Is that you have to do it by the end of January by law?
Or they fine you.
Or they fine you. Well, here they only fine you if you owe money. If you don't owe money, it's not. But I have done my usual thing, Julia, and filed an extension.
Okay.
And if we file an extension here, Andrew, we don't have to file until October 15th, our final paperwork. But if you owe money, you're going to pay interest rate. So I thought that was a cute cartoon.
We only have to. We do a tax return by the end of January, but it's only up to the beginning of the previous April. So it's almost a whole year, 9 months before that the year ends. So it's a fairly long time. In fact, I got a letter this morning reminding me to fill in my tax return, which I threw away because I won't fill it in until after Christmas.
Emmett is saying, John's on. We've got a nice report from John today, as usual, January 31st. Gruber knows it's tax day. Steve Gruber. Trivia question. How was the date of Easter determined? Steve Gruber's asking. I know the answer, but only learned a week ago. It's something to do with the moon right? Isn't it the moon? Steve Gruber will tell us in the comments. It's a great day. Looking forward to the show. Thanks, Joe Cool. Julie Ahrens, who celebrates Passover, not Easter necessarily. Hello to all the foes. It got cold again here in Cleveland, and we even got a dusting of snow. I see they got a pretty good dump of snow in Michigan, Julie. So I have my beloved mother. I don't know if she's on. Please bring Mr. Doctor. Please, Mr. Doctor, bring some sunshine into my day there in Cleveland. Bill Wingrove's speaking of winter and snow, at the Winter Haven Yacht. Nice club in Florida. Phil Walker is in Italia, Buenos Aires. Good luck, good day from Italia. Graham Sweeney, of course, up in Yale, Scotland. Fritz Mueller down in Miami. Hello, Alistair Murray. It's early down there in Oz, in Sydney and Melbourne, where it's only 06:09, but Alistair gets up early and goes bike riding. I hope he's after COVID. Do you know that, Andrew, that he got another bout? Alistair Murray got another bout of COVID. After a pretty bad bout, he had a pretty rough spell this time, he said. How we'll just start right in on the AMA. How often are people getting multiple cases? Your kids, didn't you say?
They reckon 21 million people in the UK have had it, and 1.5 million have had it again. Mm. And there are people who've had it 3 and 4 times.
So 5%, something like that?
5%, yeah.
Well, that's not too bad. Okay, well, do you also know what day it is, Julia and Andrew? Julia, you got to move to your left. I'm going to move your chair. You got to just move to your left. Look at the framing of this. I'll be criticized. Andrew already criticized you for not wearing a scarf today.
I'm in serious trouble. Oh, golly.
Thank you for sliding to your left. Do you know what day it is as well? Here's your first and only clue. This is an important day in some respects for yachting and international folks. It is, here's the reveal, International Amateur Radio Day. The International Amateur Radio Day honors how amateur radioers pioneered fast, immediate global connection in the 20th century. And yes, there is a sailing connection. That is the tip. Oh, by the way, that slide, you know what that is? It has nothing to do with amateur radio, at least nothing directly. That is a Behringer audio mixer. I have exactly that mixer, Julia, up there in the control room behind you there.
Oh, yeah.
Behind.
Yeah.
So
and an ancient one.
it is, well, it's pretty ancient. It's the 20-year-old technology, or 15 anyway. That is not amateur radio. So whatever website I dragged that from, I said that's not good. There is a more typical amateur radio shack. Hams called their, they have a room in the house. It's their radio shack. Ham radio is a licensed radio service that enables you to communicate all around the world and even outer space with your own equipment. It's vital for emergency communications, technological advancement, and it's an incredible hobby with over 750,000 licensed hams in the U.S. alone. Do you know how many there are worldwide?
Well over 1 million.
Over 3 million.
Yeah, they've been very effective in emergencies.
Emergency communications, and there are yacht clubs, especially out here in California, but yacht clubs, we used the Long Beach Yacht Club ham radio setup for comms during the 1984 Olympics. Probably progressed, and that was, of course, before cell phone. Over 3 million hams worldwide, including this ham. We'll talk about why they're called hams, amateur radio operators. Astronaut Colonel Doug Wheelock up in the International Space Station, and it was a big deal. The ham radio operators, they when they make a contact, part of the hobby is to make contact with as many countries and as many people around the world. Everybody has a little calling card called a QSL card that you send out once you've made contact with somebody. But they have helped out a lot in emergencies and continue to do so. Do you know why they're called hams, radio hams?
No.
We're going to get to that. It's clean. Do you know who the first, there's your clue, who the first ever ham radio operator was? You recognize that person, Andrew?
I guess it's Marconi.
Well done. That is, you know how to pronounce his first name. There he is with his, and he first tested this in England. And if you look here on the right, this is that spark transmitter, the way they were transmitting radio signals to begin with. That was the transmitter. This is his telegraph key, because they weren't talking, they were using telegraph, Morse code. And then this is a tape. You can see that in his hand, the teletype style that we think of today, tape printer, that he could read the dots and the dashes from the people with whom he was communicating. So that is Marconi. How do you pronounce his first name? Guglielmo, I guess, who lived from 1874 to 1937. But why is there, Commodores, ladies and gentlemen, why is there an America's Cup, indeed sailing connection, but an America's Cup connection with ham radio operators, Marconi being the original? Well, do you recognize this ship? That is the Ponce, which came from Puerto Rico. You know the town, Julia, in Puerto Rico called Ponce.
Yeah.
1899, that ship entered New York Harbor because it was to be Marconi's platform. Because in the autumn of 1899, his first demonstration of his radio rig was in the U.S. It took place when he sailed to the U.S. at the invitation of the New York Herald newspaper to cover the America's Cup International Yacht Races off Sandy Hook, New Jersey, which were between, you recognize those boats? One was Sir Thomas Lipton's boat. Shamrock and
Reliance.
Columbia. And if you look at that, those two pictures, Wikipedia got it wrong. They said the boat on the right was Columbia and the boat on the left, and you knew that the dark boat would be the boat of Sir Thomas Lipton, of Thomas Lipton Shamrock. I did some more research to be sure. First of all, on the bottom of the picture, Columbia won, by the way, 3-0 in the 1899 Cup. And on the bottom of the picture, it says Columbia and Shamrock, written on there by, I guess, the photographer, J.S. Johnston, 1899. I think he would have written Shamrock and Columbia had it been the other way around, but one never knows. So I did some more research and discovered that the white boat lost its rig, and that was an aluminum rig, one of the very first aluminum rigs, aluminium, as you would say, Andrew. And the rig fell down in Narragansett Bay in August 1899. and they replaced it. They said, well, that's not going to work, so we better, they went back to Sitka spruce. That'll make Stingray happy. Some kind of a spruce rig. But you know what the big problem was with that?
Getting it to the bay.
Well, it was in the bay, and of course they had to tow it down to New York or sail it down to New York eventually for the races. But Andrew, that was something like I don't know, 1,500 or more square foot huge mainsail, square meter, I guess, mainsail.
And very heavy material as well.
Bingo, exactly. It is cotton, and to get the mainsail after it was drenched, that took 80 men to get it off the boat onto a hay wagon, towed it to an estate called Blythewold this is in Narragansett Bay, near where the Hairsoft manufacturing plant was. But they had to dry the thing out. It took days. It got wet at night. It got moldy. It was a big deal. 80 men trying to dry out the waterlogged cotton mainsail over some period of time. That was the biggest problem. So that's a little bit of background on Marconi and this day, which is International Ham Radio Day. And the Long Beach Yacht Club ham radio call sign, we're going to talk about Long Beach Yacht Club because they have pioneered, I think, they've got a room in their clubhouse dedicated to amateur radio. They've got a club within the club, KF6QPU. And as I said, we used their 6-meter, 2-meter amateur radio system for the comms at the request of the FCC and the Olympic Organizing Committee, because you can imagine how the radio bands are overwhelmed with all sorts of stuff going on, emergency and other comms. So we used they had a radio operator in each of the race committee boats and each of the venues and so on and so forth in Long Beach in '84. And I'm sure they won't have to do that again. But why are they called radio hams?
I don't know.
Well, supposedly there were 3 or 4 different examples, but Julie, I'm going to loosen your shot up and I'm going to pan your camera because you're out of the shot, and you're got to have your beautiful face in the shot. Oh
yes,
right?
Of course.
You got to have your beautiful face in the shot. That's better. Now that I got my fancy remote. The reason, supposedly, is that the telegraphers who were using Morse code on the telegraph wires when that started in the 60s, about the same time as the America's Cup, 1850s, or
right.
The radio operators who were new at this were ham-fisted.
Aha.
There's some other excuses, but they were supposedly just croutonic, ham-fisted, so they called them ham radio operators. But wait, there is more on today. Not only is it International Amateur Radio Day and a few other things, it is time for a Fozy Focus. Talking about Long Beach Yacht Club and the Congressional Cup. I checked in this morning with none other than David B. Perry. Dave Perry, our longtime friend, rules expert. He's been on the appeals committee here in the U.S. Harmon Hawkins, the late, great Harmon Hawkins, president of U.S., then YRU, put David on the appeals committee in 1985.
Wow.
So he's approaching 40 years on the appeals committee. He has been, I think, chairman for the last 20 years. And I checked in with Dave. He's a Con Cup winner in 83 and 84. Checked in with him to talk about Jeffrey Peterson, who was leading the Ficker Cup.
Yes. And
to see what he thought of Jeffrey picking. We'll tell you more about that in a minute. And long story short, David says, yes, I remember you being I was on the jury in those days in the early 80s. And you were by far the youngest, like by 30 years. Do you remember the big protest? I barely remember this. Do you remember the big protest that decided the 84 Congressional Cup? Harold Cudmore versus Dave Perry. All 9 judges were on the protest committee. That was a bit croutonic, but everybody wanted to be involved. In the Skipper's Cove, yes. That's a room at the Long Beach Yacht Club. And the captain of the press helicopter came in to give evidence. Have you ever had a protest, Andrew, with 9 judges?
No.
Huh?
and a helicopter.
Well, and the helicopter pilot. Or the photographer, I guess, who was in the helicopter. Well, we celebrate David today, too. He's a longtime great sailor. As I said, 2-time winner of the Congressional Cup. I've been on this show any number of times, including as recently as giving that video a terrific memory of the late, great Ralph Roberts, who passed away a few weeks ago, and Dave came on with that video. That was a great remembrance. Dave was our rules expert and coach for the USA Olympic Team 2008. Here he is coaching Zach Rayleigh, who ultimately silvered in the Finn class. Zach and his sister, Paige Rayleigh, great sailors from this country. And he says, I was the rules advisor for the U.S. team in '08. In the photo, I'm discussing match racing tactics with Zach Rayleigh. Now, why is he discussing match racing before the medal race? Well, we were anticipating Ben Ainsley coming on the attack, and Zach wanted to initiate the fight. Mm-hmm. David publishes a book. Give him a shout out for his he's been doing this for years. Every 4 years, he publishes a new, updated version of his book, Understanding the Racing Rules of Sailing, the latest one through 2024. He's working, of course, on the next one as soon as they finalize the rules through 2028. Dave Perry, our Fozy and dear friend for, since college days, so the better part of 50 years. In fact, at least 50 years. Dave Perry there on the left. Today, he turns 69.
Wow.
So we wish David happy 69. Andrew, did you ever meet Dave?
No, I haven't. I know the name.
Well,
the book.
If you get the chance, look him up. He's a terrific guy. He's about our age. He looks a lot younger. He acts a lot younger than we do. He's a free spirit and a great guy. And that's David Perry. Happy birthday, David! As we get through here to show number, get our cover slide again, 610 for Tuesday the 18th with our Fozy Andrew McIrvine on. Mr. Doctor, we're going to talk about COVID, also about the preview for the Congressional Cup, which starts today. The Ficker Cup was last weekend. Also the Bahamas, as we teased in the show slide, has named sailing. It's the only country of which we're aware that has named sailing as their national sport. Let's start with a Bravo Zulu. And I think this is, I don't know, Andrew, if you know these guys, or if you probably don't know the kid, but the dad, 2 titles in 5 days. The guy on the left is young Will, and the guy on the right is his famous father, one of the nicest guys in the sport, Matty Mason, and his son Will. This is the headline. I like that other headline. Stuff, son of a gun, wins back-to-back national titles last weekend in New Zealand. He sailed around the globe, talking about Matty, the father on the right, obviously, competed in many of the world's most iconic yacht races and lifted the America's Cup 4 times. Yet nothing has made veteran Kiwi sailor Matt Mason prouder than witnessing his young son's rare sailing feat over the weekend. And Will won, first he won the Opti, and then he won the Starling National Championship. 14-year-old Will was on Saturday crowned the national champion in the Starling class only 5 days after winning the Optimus national title. He won 4 of 10 races in the Starling event at Manly Sailing Club, beating 49 other competitors despite only sailing the boat for the last 3 months. Last Monday, Will triumphed by 10 points in a 51-boat fleet at the Opti Nationals at Wakateri Boating Club. Bravo Zulu to him. He said it feels amazing, especially coming out of the Optis and straight into the Starlings. Yeah, I'm pretty sore, but I only get another day off before 5 more days of sailing in the secondary schools team national championships.
Wow.
Great stuff. Dad Matthews, Matty Mason, is one of the country's most renowned sailors, having completed 15 Sydney Hobarts and the Whitbread race, now the Around the World race, the ocean race. He also competed in 7 America's Cup campaigns. He and I did a couple campaigns together, and I guarantee you he is one of the nicest guys in the sport. Andrew, do you know him? Have you ever run across Matt Mason and Maxi? Say again?
No, I don't.
Well, look him up, because he is a class act and a really fun guy, bright guy. He says, I was never the best dinghy sailor around to say I'm best dinghy sailor around. Pause, Tom. And to say I'm stoked with what Will has achieved, his son, is an understatement. This weekend registers right up there with any of my achievements, Matthew said. And Will, to wrap this up, said, Dad introduced me to the sport when I was about 7, so all about 7 years ago, and has been there helping me as much as he can, but he mostly tries to stand back and let me do things my way. Sign of a good father. Yes. I like just having fun when I'm out sailing with my friends, but winning every now and then is also not a bad feeling. He's understated nice. Sounds just like he's very humble.
That's good, because you sometimes see very pushy parents, particularly in the Optimist fleet.
Yeah. Oh, yes.
Yeah, and I just, knowing Matty as well as I do, he'd never be a pushy parent, but he's probably right there encouraging all the time. And like his dad, Will wants to one day help Team New Zealand lift the old mug. Andrew?
Yeah, terrific. I think that's really nice.
Yeah, I just wanted to give a shout out to, I don't know Will, but I've met Matt, and his Stingray saying his Andrew's precious grandson Larry. Has your grandson Larry been on a sailboat yet?
He stood on it, yes, when he was last summer. He's only 2 on May the 9th. So he has actually been on the boat, but he hasn't been for a sail yet.
How many other grandkids do you have?
I was very careful not to be a pushy parent with my son, and I was so unpushy that he's not interested in sailing. You can't win them all.
Well,
my niece likes. My brother's daughter likes sailing with us, but my son doesn't.
And you have a son and a daughter, right? Both of them are junior doctors? Just a son who's a junior doctor.
Yeah.
Well, it's, let's see the other comments. Clark Chapin, I may have been on a protest committee that was that large at the, God, really, Clark? At 9 guys? We had the local chair. Okay, yeah, that was a special exception, too. Lots of other comments here. Andrew Pindar is on. By the way, I told you in the tech check, Andrew McIrvine, Pindar is going to come on and give us an update on the coronation, which is what, 2 Saturdays hence?
It's May the 6th.
May the 6th. So it's 25th. Yeah, so the 3 Saturdays hence. Cool shirt, Tom. Yeah, isn't 9 judges, J. Frederick Bland is saying, like putting 9 Russians in a round room and telling them to find the corner? Hello, Ted Ryman. He's late. J. Frederick Bland, Tom's in a whiteout today. I don't know if I'm in a whiteout. This is a little bit different. It's in honor of Andrew because he's been to the Stag Cruise a couple times. And this is the Stag Cruise shirt from, I guess, last year, maybe 2 years ago. You said you don't have this shirt.
Yeah, I think it's 2 years ago. Yeah.
Well, it's a Rain Spooner. Have you ever heard of Rain Spooner, Andrew?
Yeah, I was told about the designer, yeah.
Mm.
And people think it's a person, but it's not. I had to look this up and spill the beans on this on the show one time. Rain and Spooner were 2 different people. It was somebody and somebody's wife, and they combined their names, and now everybody thinks Rain Spooner is a famous shirt designer or something.
Well, they are.
Well, that's true. They are. Okay, let's carry on here and get into today's show in earnest. We always like to start the sailing, the heavy-duty sailing stuff with our Fozy, dear friend, and a superb coach, Olympic coach John Emmett in the Coach's Corner. But before we get into that, I just want to say, Andrew, since you're on and a Brit, last show when we were talking about the Weymouth and Portsmouth Olympic Sailing Academy or National Sailing Academy there, and I saw this on the wall of the building of the Andrew Simpson Foundation, of which there are several spread through your country. Together, we transform lives through sailing. And I thought that was such a wonderful claim. We should not only reprise it here, but see if you had anything to add.
Well, yeah, in fact, by chance, today at the squadron, they were racing the J70s on an Andrew Simpson Foundation charity event, and Ben was in one of them. And a friend of mine was, and Saskia Clark's in another. There are a lot of good people there. And my friend is a good sailor, but he got his work cut out with Ben and other famous Olympians to battle with in J70s. So I haven't heard the result yet.
Yeah, I think it's just an amazing claim. And I've got to work it into the show, Julia, somehow, don't you think?
Yes, we do.
Huh?
Yes.
Amazing.
Well, we have a Bart's Bash race every year that anybody can enter, any sailing club around the whole country to raise money for the foundation.
So order of magnitude, how many clubs have a Bart's Bash, do you think?
I think nearly all the dinghy clubs will have one. So it's a big event.
Nice stuff.
It is.
And I love the claim, and John Emmett also loves a claim. We're going to figure out some way to carry on. I just, Jody Shields says, you know, that cart with the sails, the big heavy wet cotton mainsail from Colombia. Jody says he was driving the cart. J. Frederick Bland says, I was just as up above other comments where I'm reading here. He's saying, I was watching a documentary that stated that Marconi didn't invent squat. He basically patented public knowledge devices and got away with it. Some poor Englishman, Lange, is that somebody, Andrew? Lange, who invented radio?
Yeah, it's quite possible. I mean, just about everything. It's always somebody, the guy who gets his name on the ticket is often not the guy who dreams it up. But all I remember, so he sat in a rather strange place on the Lizard called Goonhilly Down, which is where they transmitted the first radio to America. Don't know why I remember that.
That's a lovely name.
Very full of useless knowledge.
Yeah, it is. It is a lovely name. And speaking of Rain Spooner, it's a lovely shirt. Fritz Mueller agreeing. And then Andrew Pindar's on. He's saying Bart's Bash is actually quite international. Apparently, it's more than just in the UK.
Yes, yeah. And I think it's obviously promoted most in the UK, but I think it's the whole sailing world can join in.
Julia, I have a suggestion.
Yes.
Beach Street Yacht Club. Mm-hmm. What's the normal date? I know it's not necessarily date specific, but when is it in June? When do you try to do that?
No, it's in the autumn. It's usually in October.
Let's do a Bart's Bash, and we'll do a Bart's Bash on here live, and try to raise some money from the Fosey and others.
Okay.
And maybe who's the head? Do we know who's the head of the Bart's Bash the Andrew Simpson Foundation?
I think Ian Percy.
Okay, let's get Ian on. Ian's been on the show.
He was one of the guys competing today at the squadron as well.
Okay, so let's get Ian on the show. We'll do if he's still chair of the foundation, we'll do a Bart's Bash in October on the Beach Street Yacht Club and on Sailing Illustrated Live.
Great.
Yeah, sounds good.
Steve Gruber saying that the Nyack Boat Club on the Hudson, just north of Manhattan, has a Bart's Bash. So there's at least one, and I'm sure several others here in the U.S. But we're going to somehow do some more with this great slogan. Together we transform lives through sailing. The Andrew Simpson Foundation, the late great Andrew Bart Simpson, who of course tragically died here in San Francisco leading up to the 2013 America's Cup. Sadly. John Emmett.
Hi, Tom, Julia, and all the Fosey. I'm back in Bourne Farmhouse. Quick granary inspection. Unfortunately, it doesn't look like there's anyone working on it today, but perhaps if you go back through the shows, you'll be able to see the progress that's been made. Spring has definitely sprung, so hopefully the audio's okay. There's actually people mowing grass in the background, and the birds are in full chorus, which is actually very, very nice. I was very lucky to be born in the country, and it made me think, you know, what do we do for our rest and relaxation? Because the majority of us have very demanding jobs, and the Olympic circuit, what I do for love, is especially stressful. It's such an important job. Very lucky to do what I do, but all these things have stresses and strains. So today we're going to talk a little bit about rest and relaxation, because it's not about quantity of work, or certainly not when we talk about elite performance. It's about the quality of work, and this means it's actually really important to have a break. Rather than keeping on going and going and going and getting more fatigued and the quality of the work going down, then we want to be focused and doing good work all the time. And the problem is this fatigue, and by fatigue I don't only mean physical, I mean the mental fatigue. It's a slow process as we go down and down and down and down. It's not like suddenly we're switched on, suddenly we're switched off. Oh wow. Be interested to see how this video turns out. I literally have a plane flying overhead, but that will be me quite frequently, so I don't think I'm in any position to judge. So just a quick edit there. Bourne Farmhouse is right on the flight path from London Gatwick Airport, so it's always good to good to stop off and see my mum when I'm en route from there, and obviously to pick up at the farmhouse. So the reason why I'm talking about this rest is because it really improves the quality of your work. And the thing with that is sometimes by having a break, you can actually get more done in shorter time. I see some Scandinavian countries have been trialing 4-day working weeks and find productivity has actually increased. And the reason I talk about this now, we have 2 regattas which are very close together, the Princess Sophia Trophy followed almost immediately by Air Regatta. Now logistically that's quite difficult for some people, for people who come from New Zealand, Australia, etc. You know, it's very hard just to nip home, but that break is very important, and that break can be anything. I think a lot of people have stayed in Palma and done cycling holidays, although of course it's really good fitness, but that break is really important. It's that 11 o'clock working away at night to finish something done, when actually you will be better to complete it in the morning when you're fresh, and suddenly those problems that seemed very hard to solve when you're overly fatigued, they might seem much easier in the morning. And in terms of emotional issues, I'm a big believer in sleeping on it, so we'll quite often write emails but read them through the next morning to make sure they're really clear, not only to remove the dyslexia from my comments but to make sure it's really saying what I want to say, because I'm a big believer in having the end in mind, and sometimes you need to communicate things to different people in different ways to achieve the same result. But yeah, this idea of rest and relaxation, it's really important. And I'm trying to even have no screen days, but failing with that. So whatever it is you do to unwind, it might not seem urgent, but it is very important. So you need to make time for that. See you on the show.
John Emmett, as always, our coach, and in his coach's corner, we call that. He's saying avoid burnout, the importance of rest and relaxation. Excuse me.
And as we all know that's true, and we don't always do it.
We don't always do it, do we? Okay, John, thank you very much indeed. John Emmett Sailing, get to the front of the fleet is his claim. And I wish the U.S. Sailing would get John involved over here. I think one of our problems is coaching. More news on that perhaps on Friday, maybe next Tuesday at the latest. Please subscribe, John says. Share to your own Facebook and YouTube pages. If you're so inclined, we appreciate that very much. Mr. Andrew McIrvine is with us. Patiently as a co-host. We like to bring guys like Andrew in right at the top of the show because he is so knowledgeable. And Andrew, anything else you want to talk about before we get into COVID and your update on that topic?
No, I think I thought John's very good, very philosophical today, but I'm sure he's right. In all forms of life, you can very easily work to burnout. Certainly in medicine, a lot of people get burnt out, and it's very difficult to switch off because they're very focused, very professional people who are very dedicated. And they just, I remember when I was managing a department, and at that time they were reorganizing the contract. And I said to people, look, they're not going to pay you for the 17 sessions you're doing. What are you going to give up? And the reaction was, I'm far too busy. I can't give up. Even if I'm not paid, I can't give up. So it's funny business, medicine, but you do get people burning out.
The question right away here from Gordon Smith, does Andrew have an update on vitamin D and reducing the impact of COVID, et cetera? Do you want to start with that before we go into your slides, or would you rather do your slides first?
I don't think there's much new in vitamin D, apart from the fact that actually the vitamin D you get from sunlight is better than the pills you take. But if you live in parts of the Northern Hemisphere, like I do, then there isn't enough sunlight in the winter, so you do need to take a supplement. Really from probably October to March.
Well, I have been doing that on your advice since the get-go. And the little D3, it's everybody asks how much. Well, it's whatever you get, down at the Walgreens or the local pharmacy. 25 micrograms, 1,000 international units. Is that about right?
Yeah, I mean, people quote anything between 1,000 to 4,000, and there isn't very clear evidence of one over another. You can overdose. You've got to take a hell of a lot to overdose. So I think 1,000 or 2,000 is enough.
Okay, so you still, there's the answer to the question then of Gordon Smith. So you still do recommend. Pindar is saying, well, if you're short of sunshine, just move to Scarborough.
Yeah, it's a bit weak, the sunshine up there.
Yeah. Well,
It's the angle.
let's go to your very nicely prepared slides dated today, your COVID update with Mr. Dr. And let's also do one review, because I started out, I called you doctor, and I think it was Pindar. So you can't call him doctor. In the UK, we call senior serious consulting surgeons, we call them misters. That's even more apparently.
Yes, it's sort of inverted snobbery, because if you go back to the 16th century, physicians were educated, thinking doctors who would certainly not do anything disgusting like lance abscesses or do anything surgical. And that was left to the barber.
To the barbers. That's right.
So they were basically lower social class. So they hadn't got university degrees, and they weren't called doctor, they were called mister. And so for some reason, when first there was the London City Livery Company of barber surgeons, and there's another one for the apothecaries, which I'm actually a member of that livery company as well. And then the barbers separated from the surgeons and founded the College of Surgeons. And the College of Surgeons then became the Royal College of Surgeons. And they clung on to this thing of once you qualify as a doctor, and then once you've taken your final surgical exams, which are now in 3 and 4 stages, you go on taking exams in the UK for an extremely long time. I mean, in the States, you can go through and get your boards and you're out practicing within 6-7 years. But for surgery in England, it takes about 14. And towards the end of that, when you take the final exams, you revert from doctor to mister, which is very confusing. And because the patients don't understand it, and they think that all consultants, so consultants in other specialities than surgery, who remain as doctor, and the patients call them mister because they think that it's that way around. So they
okay. Well, a lot of people have asked, and I said,
well, they used to be, certainly in South Africa and Australia, New Zealand. I don't think Canada for a long time. So it carried on in the Commonwealth for a while, but even they've mostly dropped it. But certainly in the UK and Ireland, we've stuck with it.
Okay, well, let's go to your slides. You prepared a few slides here for us with an update, because so many people have asked to get Mr. Dr. Andrew McIrvine back on with the latest, and there is some new news, Andrew.
Yeah, there's always a new variant, because the little bug is extremely clever at replicating itself into something that's a little bit more transmissible and a little bit, more likely to spread around the world. So I just thought I'd briefly go through the World Health Organization's definition of variants. So they've got the ones they aren't terribly worried about, variants under monitoring. The variant of interest, they're the ones that could turn out nasty. And in fact, the present one that is populating most of the world, and particularly 90% of America, is Omicron XBB 1.15, and that's a variant of interest. Variants of concern are the ones where they think it might actually produce more serious disease. At the moment, there are none of those, and the Arcturus it's just come in as a variant under monitoring, but it's produced a lot of infection initially in India, and it's spreading around the world, and probably about 7% of the cases in America are now that variant. I mean, 50,000 new cases in India isn't very much, but it went up in a month from 13,000 cases in a month to 50,000. but one has slight doubts. I mean, there are about 50,000 people live on Delhi railway station. So how the hell they know what's going on? I find the statistics from India, they haven't got a hope of any sort of accuracy. They've got more than 1.1 billion people in India. So 50,000 isn't very many.
But the good news is there appears to be so far no change.
People aren't getting iller. They're just some different symptoms. They seem to have eye irritation in young people, the people who've had it. That's a new symptom. We've gone through a range. The bug is extraordinary. I mean, you think we started out losing smell. That all really went away. Lots of other flu-like symptoms. It's been through a whole gamut of symptoms as it's changed, but it's still around.
Okay, well, how about this next slide? We've been talking since we've had you on the show about masks. And what's the latest on masks?
You've almost got, I'm not sure whether you laugh or cry on this, because if you remember back at the beginning, there were people taking very strong positions about masks or not masks. And I actually rarely wore a mask in the operating room because there's very little evidence that they make much difference. And in fact, what happens is you probably collect bigger bits of stuff that fall out of the side of the mask that would just blow away. And it doesn't certainly give you very much protection. So, and certainly when I was wearing magnifying loupes to do fine work, they fog up. And so I didn't wear a mask. These guys at in the Oxford Institute of Evidence-Based Medicine, they did a whole lot of research on masks before the pandemic, and they updated it recently. And so essentially, they didn't say that masks do work or don't work. They were very careful to phrase it and say that there is no evidence at the moment either way. So they were then attacked by the woman who wrote an op-ed in the New York Times, which was personally very aggressive to them, because she obviously believed extremely forcefully that masks were the answer. And that the Cochrane review, Cochrane is an independent funded organization that looks at, have committees that look at all forms of treatment and theoretically look at the evidence and look mainly at randomized controlled trials and come up with a review on each thing. And it's meant to be totally scientific, dispassionate, no conflicts of interest anywhere. But the leaders of the Cochrane review, the woman who runs it, basically contradicted her own Cochrane review authors when there was this pressure from the New York Times and pushed them under a bus in a way. Luckily, they're two bearded gentlemen who are not easily put off, and they fought back very hard. And it's just such a nonsense. It's become so politicized. I mean, your Dr. Fauci started out against masks, then he flipped and became pro-mask. I'm still, the hospital I used to work in, I saw a note, they've now said you don't have to wear masks all over the hospital, you only have to wear them in certain wards. But, this is not science. We haven't got evidence. We haven't got any good studies that show that masks make a blind bit of difference. The only thing that I think they probably, if you're an infected person, you don't spread it around quite so much if you wear a mask. But in terms of protection otherwise, I think there's no evidence. And it doesn't matter which sort of mask you use either.
Well, the comments are rolling in now. First of all, Baton Rouge said, and this is Batten Kennan down in Charleston, who goes by Baton Rouge. He says, Andrew has been very consistent on masks this whole time. Stingray will remind me, we'll get back to Stingray's question about Paxlovid. Masks, for me, did the job of bringing attention to stay distant for others during the pandemic. Yeah, for me, Stingray, what it did is I kept touching my face and probably spreading it more that way. James Frederick Bland, Boomer Bland is saying New York Times always enjoys silencing all opinions, but their own. Joe Holtzman, of course I know. Of course, a journalist knows more than a doctor. Not. And
washing hands, actually, there is evidence that made a difference. I think I put it on the next slide, but
yeah,
that's sort of surprising, except it isn't, because you've just said it. We all touch our nose and face all the time, and if you've got bugs in your face, and that's the way you spread it. As much. I mean, initially they even said, "Oh no, it's not airborne." That was patently rubbish, but no,
well,
there was a lot of there's been a lot of rubbish. There remains a lot of rubbish.
A couple more. Rick Bannerow says, "Wait, what? The New York Times politicized something? Say it ain't so." Mr. Dr. Mister. Graham Sweeney, who's always got a pithy remark. You see that, Julia?
Yes.
You want to read that one?
Masks saved us all from ugly people.
Ugly people. Clark Taven's got a long study and a link.
Sexist. I better not.
Say again?
Well, there was always the feeling that there's some very, very pretty nurses when they got masks on because their eyes were lovely, and then they took the mask off and it wasn't quite so good.
Well, you know why it's just now starting to come out. There's articles are starting cautiously to appear. You know why Fauci flip-flopped? First of all, he knew the answer that masks didn't do much.
Yeah.
Yes, maybe it helped keep you from infecting somebody else, maybe, but not really.
Yeah.
Especially once you started. I fiddle fart with my mask more than it was terrible. But apparently the reason he flip-flopped is they put so much pressure. They follow the dollar, follow the money. They put so much pressure on Fauci and the government. We want to sell more masks. Sell more masks. First of all, the reason I flip-flopped is because we wanted to save them for the medical personnel. And then follow the money. The industry put real pressure on. Andrew, how about this other comments? There's a couple other things on this slide that are interesting. Or do you want me to go to the next one?
Yeah, I mean, it's worrying that even the UK public health authorities they didn't rubbish the Cochrane review, but they said, well, we don't really believe it, and we'll carry on telling people to wear masks.
I don't know about the other two.
Then they used some evidence that was completely rubbish evidence, and that's a bit depressing because they're meant to be looking at it from an academic point of view.
The only person, Graham Sweeney says, who benefited from a mask was Zorro. Or maybe Batman or something. I still haven't cleared them out. I'm not sure why. I still, in every jacket, in every blazer, in every sports coat, in every yacht club vest, I've got a mask here or there, and I've started using them to wipe blow my nose into.
Well, I remember some poor girls who were in Italy. You had to have the N95 masks, and there were a couple of girls, and they were flying back on a British Airways airplane from Rome, and at that point, the British flying out of Britain, you didn't have to wear a mask, but flying from Italy, you did. And they were made to go away and buy a mask in order to get onto an airplane going to Britain that didn't need a mask by the so-called authorities. Because one of the really sad things about the pandemic is it brought out all the little people given a little bit of power behave like little Hitlers. And if you've got a chance to boss people around and you're in a fairly minor job, then those sort of people do, and it's that's Rick Bannerow saying virtue signaling at its finest, and then you perhaps spread the other or put your finger on the other problem with all this, the control freaks. Andrew, a related question. Stingray is asking, are COVID tests still required for flying to the EU? No.
No?
No.
How about to the U.S., Julia? Do you know? Do we have to? Anybody have to be tested to fly in or out?
I don't really know, but I haven't heard about it lately.
Don't think so.
Don't forget the Lone Ranger, Bill Wingrove says. Okay, so have we done masks? Move to hand washing. How about hand washing, Andrew?
Yeah, hand washing does. In the same authors found that hand washing does reduce transmission, but I think the ferocious use of antiseptics on every surface, on every piece of public building or public transport, is, again, it's been quite useful for the companies that make alcohol, but it doesn't really do anything.
Yes.
So those are the guys. These are the men with beards who I have a lot of respect for, because they stood up to all the crap that's thrown at them, and they just stick with the science.
Congratulations.
A question then about there's been some kind of about worrying about creating super bacteria and super bugs. Should we be using antibacterial soap or just regular soap and hot water?
Regular soap's fine.
Regular soap is fine. And
Yeah.
is it a danger to use antibacterial soap?
Well, in theory, we could be producing more superbugs that will be resistant to everything. Certainly, we have resistance to antibiotics. Resistance to antiseptics isn't as big a problem.
Okay. Viral origins.
Yeah, this is very interesting because this goes back really to a chap called Peter Danzak and his colleagues, who got a letter published in the Lancet saying that it was absolutely shocking. This was nothing to do with the Institute of Virology. And Jeremy Farrow initially was an author of that letter, despite 3 or 4 years earlier being very worried about the lack of biosecurity in the labs in China. And when they sent the WHO team out to look at it, of course, they weren't allowed to go in. They were shown the wet markets, and everything was pushed at them that they should believe that it had come from bats. But the bats where the viruses were found were thousands of miles away from Wuhan. And if you look at a map that shows where all the infections were in China, they were all around Wuhan. So it's sort of, the circumstantial evidence is just loading up and up and up. And I know that there's been a Senate publication in the States, and there've been quite a lot of information coming out from other scientists. And in theory, the Chinese plant, who is the head of the WHO, from the guy from Africa who isn't even a doctor, he's meant to have set up a second inquiry and a second team to go into China, but China completely stonewalled it. And there was a comment from the head of the Secret Service in the UK saying that whatever was there, he's absolutely sure has all been buried and hidden by now. So it won't be possible to get the truth, but the circumstantial evidence is so strong that it wasn't a deliberate leak. It was just pretty poor security. There's another clever thing that the US intelligence spotted, which was that in October 2019, there was sudden lack of mobile phone activity all around the Wuhan Institute. And that was almost certainly because there was an emergency shutdown of the facility at that point. It also known that they were conducting this gain of function research, which is terrifying. I mean, how the hell? I mean, scientists are bloody dangerous. I mean, trying to make viruses more dangerous and then develop vaccines against them. I mean, it's not surprising we get into trouble when you've got complete big crackers research like that going on. So I believe absolutely that that's where it started.
Okay, well, I think there's a lot of people here, and increasingly so. Those who were skeptical, I think, are coming around to that. I agree with you. And all I'm doing is reading the press reports, and of course, there's a House Select Committee looking into this now, and it's apparently they've got today or tomorrow somebody who was the former head of the Department of, our top security guy, I guess, in the Trump administration, right, Julia?
Yeah.
But it's becoming increasingly clear. I sense that it wasn't intentional. We got some people way out on the right, I think, who would like to think it was done intentionally, just like we got people on the left who don't want to be critical of the PRC in China for any reason. And
well, I think that came out in the Hancock diaries. here where Hancock, you can't believe his stupidity. He gave all his emails to a journalist who he thought was going to help him write his sort of biography of the whole thing, and she promptly gave them all to the Daily Telegraph, and there's full of incriminating evidence against him. But one of the things was that they were falling over backwards not to upset the Chinese, rather than going for the truth.
Well, as James Frederick Bland is saying, it always said it was either accidental or purposeful release of COVID. Joe Holtzman, boy, he is spot on. Yep. Jack Nicholson, Jody Shields is saying, once said, you want the truth? You can't handle the truth. Yeah, Steve Groover, it doesn't matter whose fault it is, really. I mean, it does, because at the end of the day, it only matters because it has caused trillions of dollars of damage.
And millions of dollars.
Well, trillions of dollars of damage to the economies of various countries. And, if this was...
It's killed a lot of people.
And to say nothing of killing millions of people. So that's, I guess, let's go to this next slide, the viral origins. You've covered that one.
Yeah, I mean, they were developing vaccines certainly before. They had a whole database of all the viruses that they created, and that database was shut down. And it was, it was free information around the world initially, and it was shut down in September and hasn't been seen since.
Okay, let's get to. Go ahead. Sorry.
There are all sorts of things that make you worry. Like the director of they sent, I think, to Shanghai. They sent the early viral material to Shanghai, and the whole genome was sequenced and was then released to the world, and that lab and the director have disappeared.
Yeah. And Pindar is saying, and not only did it cause all the damage we were talking about and the loss of life, but it made a whole bunch of people a bloody fortune. Dr. Tedros, that guy is got to be the crouton of the croutons of late. The biggest cost is the mental scar, Jody Shields is saying. Serious comment from Jody. The biggest cost is the mental scar the pandemic has left on a lot of people. Yes, Jody, particularly people who've been locked down for a long time, particularly kids, right? Particularly kids.
Yeah.
Okay, how about we're going to get now really into the controversial one. How about vaccine risk and damage?
Yeah, well, this has sort of come up lately, and some of the people I did have quite a lot of respect for seem to be jumping on the sort of vaccines causing huge amounts of damage. I think
you wouldn't be talking about Dr. John Campbell.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's also almost become an anti-vaxxer at this point.
He has, yeah. Well, he's a nurse with a lot of knowledge and a very clear communication style, and he was very popular, and I had a lot of time for him, and I thought he delivered a lot of useful information. But he's sort of, I don't think he's jumped on a bandwagon, because he's not like the vast majority of anti-vaxxers did it for fame and money, and there are some very dodgy characters where, as you know, particularly in the States, they're all the same people who were pushing ivermectin and every other weird treatment, and a lot of it was for money. He doesn't do it for money. He's very altruistic and very honest, but he's produced that program every day for 3 years now,
at least.
And there's nothing else in his life. There can't be. You know how long it takes to put together a program, and he puts these together every single day. And in the end, he's not having the R&R that John recommends. And I think he's slightly lost the plot, because, I mean, the first time he put up a thing saying he looked at the figures from one area, and they gave him a lot of duff figures, not deliberately, but basically he produced this amazing graph of how many people had gone into a little hospital in southern England with myocarditis and pericarditis, and it looked like it was a sort of 20-fold increase, and it wasn't. It was just they managed to confuse the year with the month, so they there was a 12 times difference.
Yeah, but to be fair,
but
the guy, and he came almost immediately and apologized and said, I got it wrong. But to be fair, he's been pretty darn good across the long haul, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, absolutely. But it seems to that seems to put a little worm in him to say that there's a huge increase in cardiac deaths and myocarditis, and really there isn't any stuff to back that. There have always been sudden cardiac deaths in young athletes, and this is something that's happened. Often they have some sort of unrecognized cardiomyopathy, some sort of electrical disturbance, and they have a cardiac arrest and they die when they're young and fit. And this has always happened. But now, if that happens to you, it's immediately assumed it's the vaccine.
And you're saying the evidence does not point in that direction. Moreover, you're saying that millions of lives have been saved by vaccination.
Exactly. Yeah. And the other thing is, one lot are saying it's the mRNA because it's an evil Frankenstein monster that's been created. And then Australia have actually banned the viral vector vaccines at the moment.
Yeah, what about Switzerland?
Switzerland, yeah, they've basically said you can only have a vaccine if it's given to you by a doctor and it's prescribed by a doctor. And if there are any complications, then that doctor will be held responsible. Which doesn't sort of encourage you to be a vaccinator. But yeah, the Swiss are always a little funny. I mean,
so if you're a doctor in Switzerland, and I thought I'd read it elsewise, but you probably got later info. I thought they said that if only a doctor now can prescribe a vaccine, you can't go get it. It's not the government or the canton or whatever. And if the doctor prescribes it, then you can get it. But now you're saying the doctors can't do it. And if they do it, and they get sick, they can do it.
What they've done is say, but if anything goes wrong, you're not going to claim it back from the state. You can claim it back from your doctor's insurance.
Right. Yeah. And of course, the big pharma is got a blanket immunity from the government.
Usually, especially in Switzerland.
Well, I mean, here in the States for producing these vaccines in a hurry, right, Julia? Mm-hmm. So let's go back to your slide. All medicines are side effects. Now, any cardiac event you've said is attributable to a vaccine, and there's problems with both mRNA and viral vector vaccines. They have their problems. So that leads to the question, Doctor, boosters or not, what are we supposed to do now?
Well, my wife, who is in a high vulnerable group, has been offered a booster this autumn. She's had all the boosters so far, and she's had COVID. So I think she's essentially pretty well protected. But I also think that the vaccine is very low risk on her. What's more worrying is that there's zero risk of COVID now in children and young adults, zero risk of them getting seriously ill. And so there's a tiny risk from the vaccine, but there's a tiny risk from the disease. So the risk-benefit ratio is all wrong. So I don't think there's any justification for giving more boosters to young people. And I would now only vaccinate people over 65 who were relatively vulnerable. I'm not even sure, and I'm over 65, I'm not even sure whether I'm going to have another one. I've had 4 and I've had COVID, so I reckon I'm probably covered.
Well, how long do you think you're covered? Because both Julie and I have now finally, and Julia more latterly than I, have had COVID, and you had two shots and a booster. You didn't have a second. You had a bad reaction to the first booster.
Yeah.
How many shots, how many jabs have you had, Andrew?
4.
You've had,
because I was a trial. It should have been 3.
So you've had 4. I've had 3, and I've had COVID. So how long, if there is quite clearly there's protection from having COVID, but how long does that last? And at age 70, should I worry about it?
No, I think it's a bit like the flu jab, which I've been pretty reluctant to have most years because it's always the year before flu.
Yeah.
COVID's not actually changing as fast as flu. It's a simpler virus, and it's still. But remember that your immunity from the booster and from the vaccine is really only onto the spike protein, whereas there are a huge number of antigens on the rest of the virus, which you're protected from if you've had COVID. So you've got better protection. Natural immunity is better than the vaccine. So I think if you've had both, if you've never had COVID, then I would consider going on and having a booster. If you had COVID, I think you can probably not worry about it.
And especially if you're old. If you're over 65 and you have not had COVID, you'd probably go get a...
Then I'd go for it, yeah.
You'd go for it.
Because the only people who are getting seriously sick now are in their 80s.
Okay, if you're just joining us, we're about an hour and 11 minutes, and 11 minutes after 2 here, after the hour, wherever in the world you are. Thanks for joining us. A lot of people on here interested to hear from Mr. Dr. Andrew McIrvine, who's with us live via Skype from his home in London, where it is 22:11, 11 minutes after 10 in the evening there. Thanks again for coming on, Andrew. We're talking right now about COVID, but we're going to get back to talking about Maxi sailing, because he's also Secretary General of the International Maxi Association, former Admiral of the RORC, and just an all-around good guy and good sailor. Anything else on this slide before we go to Is It Dying Down?
Let's press on.
Okay.
We're going to get back to sailing.
Yeah, we get back to sailing. Is it dying down, Andrew?
Well, if you look at this, then it's pretty clear on this graph that where it was peaking in most of the world, and it's slowly coming down in nearly all countries. And it really is not, this is daily confirmed cases per million. So it's nothing like it was, but it hasn't gone away completely.
Well, what about France? Why is it creeping up in France?
Well, you get blips like this, but again, it just depends how much you stretch the graphical axis. You can make it look worse. So it has gone up. It's like if you look at the two bits of that graph, you can say, oh, it's gone up 100%, but of course it's gone up from a low number to a slightly higher number, and it's done it more in France than in other places. It's very difficult, and that's what I said in the later graph. It's very difficult to assess because in most parts of the world now, not very many people are testing. So there are certainly a lot of people who've got what they think is a cold and have probably got COVID, but they haven't tested.
Yeah, that's your point on your next slide. It's just not tested.
Look at the number of people testing, and it's gone down dramatically. And this is just in the last few weeks. It's gone. That's quite a low figure, and it's still going down because, well, we've stopped being given free test packs like we were earlier, and not many people want to go out and buy them. So there's not many people testing, so we really don't know.
We can still get them here if you're on Medicare, on our government old folks medical program. You can get free tests. So we got a closet full of them up at Julia's, and we got a closet full of them down here. Still deaths. I mean, patients are admitted, but the death rate and the admission rate is quite low, right?
That's the admission rate, which is steadily going down. But the average hospital's still got 20 or 30 patients who are COVID positive, but most of those patients that are COVID positive aren't in hospital for the COVID. They just all get tested when they come in, and they come in for something completely different and are found to be COVID positive. They may not even have symptoms. So that is not a very good judge either of what's really happening. The excess deaths have come down again, and that was still a mystery. That's happened all over the world, and there are all sorts of reasons, and they're all different in different countries. But overall, there have been more deaths than expected. And you'd think it would be the other way around. If you carried off all the vulnerable people with COVID, there should be fewer deaths, not more deaths.
Now, a lot of comments now. Gordon Smith saying testing stopped in Denmark about a year ago, but testing of communal sewers continues and will probably remain. I remember them doing that here and in New Zealand and other places. Luca Craig is saying here in New Zealand, hospitalizations have gone up recently. But again, I don't think by an order of magnitude, or they may have been because they were so low to begin with, it may be an order of magnitude. They may have gone from 1 to 2, and therefore they doubled. But it's still pretty low, right, Andrew?
Yes.
Fritz Mueller is saying his mother, who's 99, and I are fully vaxxed and boosted, still COVID free, what would be a good strategy going forward with zero risk? And of course, there is never a zero risk. By the way, isolation was cruel for seniors' social well-being too, not just kids. What's a good strategy going forward?
It's really cruel. Not they weren't allowed to see their children and grandchildren, and that is actually what keeps you going when you're older. So it's really cruel. I think if they've had boosters before and they haven't had much of a reaction, then it's perfectly safe to have another one.
Okay. And somebody said that they've just reauthorized CDC here. I'm not sure I'd go to my doctor. I would go to Andrew. When I thought I had COVID, I called Andrew up and said, hey, I think I got COVID. He said, good, take the week off, take 2 aspirin and call me, or take 2 Tylenol and call me in the morning. Yeah, Chris actually saying the CDC just approved an additional booster for people over 65 and those who are immunocompromised. Jody Shields, as usual, he's saying, screw COVID. Let's talk about flapping or fap. Maybe he wants to talk about fapping. Flapping, I think he said. He's still the only guy who can use the word testicle on this show. We're testing things. What is amazing? I don't know who Ping 210 is. Look at this comment, Julia. Ping 210 is saying, what is amazing is that the Secretary General of the WHO, that's Dr. Tedros, right? Tedros,
yeah,
has been reelected, and there was no other candidate proposed by any other country.
I know, it's appalling.
Appalling. Okay. We aren't using refrigerated trucks for morgues now. That's an improvement. Yeah, that's true. 300 last week due to COVID. Okay, they got a bit of an uptick in New Zealand, apparently. Excess death, Rick Bannerow is saying, was a function of motorcycle accident victims testing positive and the number fudging that generated revenues from the Fed. Yeah, that's true. The hospitals all around were saying, oh, yeah, we got X many people dying of COVID. Of course, they were dying with COVID, with COVID, not of COVID.
Yeah.
To get funding because of the COVID deaths. What about long COVID, Andrew? I seem to have, and it may be something else, and if it lasts much longer, I'm going to go get the ENT doctor, the ear, nose, and throat doctor, to check me out. But I got COVID, and then I had a sniffle, and only on one sinus on one side, and I've had it since October. And it goes away, and then it sort of comes back, and then it goes. And I don't know if it's COVID related or if if I've got to improve the quality of my tequila. I don't know.
I think it's characteristic of some sinusitis as well. I think there is no doubt that long COVID exists. There was an interesting study, but it only had about 41 patients in it in Oxford, where they were trying a new drug. They're also trying to find a more accurate way of diagnosing it with MRI, because at the moment it's a license. If you don't fancy doing any work, it's a license to say, I feel terribly ill from my long COVID and therefore I'm not going back to work. We've always had post-viral syndromes. We've had all these diagnoses which in the Victorian era was called neurasthenia. More recently, it's the whole package that is, some of it is ME, which is another one that you can't actually, there's no absolute test to diagnose. It no doubt exists, but it's the tip of the iceberg of a lot of people who don't really have a diagnosis and just don't want to go to work. There's been a massive increase in this country because you get paid not a lot, but you get paid if you're off permanent sick. And there's been a huge increase in that in the UK. We had a lot of people who were possibly a bit work shy, who there's a limit to, you can get unemployment benefits.
Excuse me, what was that? You just used the term of art, work shy?
Shy, yeah.
That sounds like what's going on a bit right now in France. There's a bunch of people that are work shy that are rioting in the streets. I mean, I look at, we have a lot of friends and a lot of foes.
Setting fire to a few sheep. I mean, it's normal in France. If there's a protest, they set fire to the town hall and go mad, and the government always backs down, so they carry on doing it. But all that, I mean, that is crazy. There's no other country in Europe that lets people retire on a full pension at 62.
Exactly.
And all he was doing was putting it up to 64.
Exactly.
So that's bonkers. But then I mean, I've got friends there say you can't run a business because you can't sack anybody, you can't move anybody. It's their socialized system is pretty demented. No, but we have a problem in that you get unemployment benefit, but after a while, if you refuse to take a job, they take the benefit away. So at that point, you develop a long-term sickness, and then you get paid for that. So
well, it is. We got comments here, but then we should get on to sailing, I suppose. Rick Bannera, who sounds like his last name, his family name is French, longtime friend, used to run the Rolex yachting involvement here in this country and did it beautifully. It is always France's fault, he says. Hamish Ross, who's just joined, he's wanting to know if this is, of course, he's over 60, so he should talk. Is this now an old fart's health show? And Pindar has asked me, he's saying, if I've got problems with my left nostril, he's wanting to know with which nostril do I snort? I guess he means cocaine. Yeah, and of course, I don't snort with either. But seriously, Andrew, the long COVID thing, it's where COVID in the serious cases, from what I understand, reading it's where the COVID has migrated and caused inflammation in other organs, right? Is that a proper explanation?
They've found the spike protein in the brains of people, and they think that then sets up an inflammatory process, and that causes the brain fog and the long COVID symptoms. That's the latest theory. So the virus can disintegrate, but bits of it get left behind, even though it's not active and it's not replicating, but it's causing an inflammatory reaction.
Okay, one last question, because Julia's got a question.
Yeah, there have been
two last questions. First, Julia's.
No, how about muscle?
Half the Fosie are now jumping up and down saying we've had enough of all this sickness.
I know.
Yeah, but hang on, we don't get you on here that often. So besides, it's my show, not Jody's, and Hamish.
And we've got sailing coming up. I was just wondering that muscle weakness and lack and continuation has always been used as a sideline, but still there. As a post-COVID.
Yeah, I mean, there's a huge bunch of symptoms, and which of them are COVID specific? It's impossible to prove because we don't have a test that says that this is still COVID related.
Okay, the other question was Paxlovid. If you get COVID, especially if you're old. And when I got it, you said don't take it unless you really you have bad symptoms. Don't take it. So I didn't. Julia did take it. Your symptoms were so we were worried you might get, because you're a few years older than I, but you're still, you're well, 14, 15. But your symptoms were a little rougher than mine, at least initially. What about Paxlovid, Andrew?
Well, it does seem to have an effect. It seems to decrease the symptoms in people with bad attacks. There's conflicting evidence about the bounce back you get when you stop it, which I think happened to Julius to a certain extent. But there have been studies saying that's probably not very common. So I think it has a place, but mostly, luckily, these days, people don't get very bad symptoms with it.
Well, okay, that
for a couple of days, but it's not much worse.
Fog Machine said that Paxlovid saved a 70-year-old friend, worked almost immediately. And John Sangmeister's on and saying, hi, Andrew. And I know that John took Paxlovid. He had bad symptoms when he got it. And John's, he's a bit younger than we are. But he had bad symptoms, and he said he took the Paxlovid, and it almost immediately, cured him and made him feel much better indeed, and he got through it in pretty good shape. So it's still, if you can get it, I guess it's increasingly difficult to get. But you're saying if you have bad symptoms, and you can take it, in the first 5 days?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's such a spectrum that. I mean, I felt absolutely ghastly for about 2 days and then recovered quite quickly. I was very lucky. But other people are ill for weeks. So and theoretically you've got the same infection. So it's very difficult. Obviously, if I'd taken Paxlovid, I would say that was why I was better after 2 days.
Yeah, well, the problem is that a lot of people then have the so-called Paxlovid rebound, and some people are saying that Paxlovid causes long COVID, and some people...
Well, again, you have a psychological thing. If everybody tells you you're going to feel terrible after you stop taking it, then you will.
Absolutely.
Jody Shields, final question. He says, any point mixing Paxlovid with gin and tonic?
Oh, very, very important.
He said, Jody says that my doctor told me that hops mixed with water will fix everything. Okay. With that, I think that's a great update, Andrew. Thank you very much indeed. And I think maybe we get on with this next.
Just ask John, did he get rid of his worms?
His ivermectin.
Because that's all it does.
Yeah, John Sangmeister, took ivermectin, I guess. Okay, enough of all that. I'm just, again, you've been a great help, and we appreciate very much your guidance through all this, and hopefully we're not going to have to get much more guidance from you or anybody else. But if we do, we'll get you back on. But let's now put your other hat on and talk about your role as the Secretary General of the International Maxi Association. And he's not exactly a Fozy, but he is definitely a cool person. Tell us about this guy, who is what, your vice president now of the IMA?
Well, he's one of the, we have, it's a bit like an American company. We have lots of vice presidents. On the board of vice president. But they're technically, they're vice presidents for each of the divisions of the classes, because when I took over, the Maxis were divided in the most impossible way, because they called themselves cruiser racers, racer cruisers, racers. And of course, it was rubbish, because the ones who said they were cruisers, because they had the fact that they had a carbon mast going through the so-called bathroom, and the and this sort of massive square top mainsail, and then they have, but they go cruising with the family, So we've abolished all that, and we've now divided into Maxis 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Except for Roberto, where we had to invent a new class called Maxi Zero, because Roberto is a great guy, but he's like the Duracell bunny. You can't stop him. He's a small chap, and he's bouncing around all over the world. So if he isn't sailing boats, he's racing cars. And he had his first Maxi was Super Nicker, which was a 60-foot Mark Mills fairly extreme design, but that wasn't nearly extreme enough for him. So he persuaded Mark to build him an America's Cup style flying Maxi. So this is, again, the 60-foot, and this thing gets up on its two foils just like an America's Cup boat. The difference being he wants to go offshore racing in it at night. So last year they charged around during the day, and they came to some of the regattas. They came to Porto and they came to Saint-Tropez. The problem is, if you mix it in with an ordinary fleet, it has problems, because it doesn't point very well, and it also, to get it up on the foils after you tack, you have to go right downwind. So on a straight reach, the thing might be doing 40, 50 knots, but if it's just going down Bomb Alley in Porto Cervo, it hasn't got a hope of keeping up with anything. And if it's light weather, if it's under sort of 8 knots, it's very difficult for it to get up on the foils.
Are there any others underway?
Not that I've heard of. I mean, he's happy to lend the moles to anybody, and people were hopeful it would be much easier for us, in a way, if there were 2, 3, 4 of them, so they could race together, because they don't fit into any of our categories. I mean, the nearest thing I could put him with, and well, the other new thing we've done this year is for the first time ever, we've got a Maxi multi-hull division at our Worlds in Porto Cervo. So we're going to have 5 Maxi multi-hulls. And in a way, he'd be better off sailing with them than he is with sailing with the rest of the fleet. Although the new gunboats, etc., point just as well as a monohull, so they actually go upwind really well. So again, there's a difficulty there. But you've got to give the guy credit because it's extremely revolutionary and inventive, and somebody's got to do it. And one day there may hopefully be more of them.
How does it go in light
he's
air?
A speed freak. He's racing cars all the time, all over the world. I mean, more lately in America. And he's changed his latest cars, a Ferrari, and he does reasonably well. And he's a massive enthusiast.
How about light air? A couple questions about performance.
It's hopeless in light air because it doesn't get up on its foils.
Well, that's a problem.
And it's very quick. So if it's having to sail like an ordinary boat, it's not quick at all.
More money than sense is what Boomer Bland, James Frederick Bland, is saying. Well, it's interesting. You like the technology, or you think it's a passing fad or phase, or?
I think it's ahead of its time. It's we all thought everybody would go to canting keels, didn't we, a few years ago? And there was incredibly successful boats like the Cookson 50s, Ramblers, others with canting keels, but again, they've remained a niche thing, and they were always difficult to rate. This will never hit the big time, but it's interesting that somebody's willing to spend the money and do the experiment. So I'm not critical. I've been supportive. In fact, I had to be very supportive because I couldn't persuade the rating office to give him a rating to start with, and he wanted to come and play with the other boats. They also, the yacht club, the organizing authorities for a lot of events were absolutely terrified of the prospect of him tearing around 40 knots out of control. So I said, you've got to go and show them. You've got to come to Porto-Cervo and show that you're not actually dangerous and this thing is perfectly controllable and safe, which he did. And now people aren't quite so frightened of it. But you can understand if you've got your multi-million-pound boat on a start line and you've got this thing that looks like it's completely out of control, which might well crash into you, it's not very reassuring.
Okay, well, foilers are ridiculous when they're not foiling, but very cool when they are. Pioneers are always considered loony until they aren't.
Yeah, well, that's my view.
Yeah. Well, okay, it's interesting. Thanks for updating us on that. What else is going on in your world, in the Maxi world? How's the state? What's your thumbnail on what the state of the sport?
Well, Phil Walker came up earlier and saying he was in Bella Italia, and I know what he's doing in Bella Italia because he's actually project managing a new 101-foot Wally, although it's sort of not a Wally. Wallies, because we aren't racing Wallies as a separate class anymore. They've joined the rest of the fleet. We've got a new Baltic 68. So-called Cafe Racer, which is almost launched. So that's, interestingly, the two previous presidents of the IMA, Klaus-Peter Offen and Thomas Fischer, both got new boats. There's the Swan 80 from PG Luripiana, which is, I think there's almost a second one of those being built, and that's a fantastic boat. We've got still got a lot of interest, and we've got very good entries for the Europeans in Sorrento. We've got big entries for the Juralia, and for Roberto Lacorda invented this 151 Miglia race, which goes from Livorno and then also around the Juralia rock at the top of Corsica, and then south of Elba and into Puntala. And that's a brilliantly organized race because they put on a massive party in the old fortress in Livorno before you go on the race. Then you go on the race and they have a massive party at the other end in Puntala. It's beautiful outdoor dinner. So they've got it sussed, and they originally said it was a 151-mile race and they'd only have 151 entries. And now they're turning them away at 250 entries. So it's been a massive success. And that's all in 10, 11 years with a pandemic in the middle. So you've got to say that that's superbly organized.
Couple
We've got
other,
the Aegean
Gordon,
race.
sorry, a couple other questions, Andrew. In fact, a lot of questions. Gordon Smith, and this is a big question, so I'll come back to your question, Gordon. Baton Rouge, Baton Canada is saying, whatever happened to the Swan 125, the big Russian boat?
It's in a shed in Barcelona.
Impounded? I mean, is it part of
It's not impounded. He's just put it away. He's actually got Monegasque and Cypriot nationality, and he's been out of Russia for a long time, and he isn't sanctioned. And I think he's sort of rather hoping that things will calm down. I mean, did you see that? I've never seen such a completely useless statement as the one that came out of World Sailing this week, which said, it went on for about a whole page saying, we're going to make a decision, but we're not quite sure when, and we're not sure what it'll be, but we think we'll tell you later.
And meanwhile, we embrace the guidance.
We'll try and be nice to the Ukrainians, yeah.
Yeah, we embrace the guidance of the IOC. That was the headline. We welcome the guidance from the IOC. Well, of course they do. They have to.
Well, the other thing is that they've signed a document. The IOC have made all sports sign a document about sustainability to a new ISO standard, all about sustainability, which sailing is in real trouble. And I wrote to David Graham about this. He hasn't as yet replied.
This is David Graham, the secretary, the new
head of World Sailing. I said, look, do you realize what you just signed us all into? Because there is no such thing as a recyclable sail.
Yeah. Or carbon hull or carbon anything
landfill.
else.
Everything we use goes into landfill. It's dreadful.
Yeah, good point. Just quick question from Stingray. Wow, what a circuit schedule. When is Sorrento? He's semi-retired. He's retired and Footloose and Fancy Free. Maybe we'll run over to Sorrento, I think.
Well, I've got a very busy life after I've gone for a little cruise in the Caribbean, friends.
So you're leaving tomorrow to go to the Caribbean, but when is Sorrento? When is that event?
Well, I'll tell you. Well, Palma Vela is the first week in May in Mallorca, and that's got a good entry of. It's got 10 Maxis, which we haven't had for a while, so that's coming back. Then the following week, there's the Tregolfi week, which includes the Maxi Europeans. So the Tregolfi race starts on the 12th of May, and then the following week, that's a Friday, and then the following week is racing in the Bay of Naples from Sorrento, which is the Maxi Europeans, which we've got 27 boats at the moment.
Wow.
So we then go after that. There's the 151 Milia. After that, there's the Giralia, and then things calm down. The July, there's the Aegean 600. August, there's Palermo Monte Carlo, and then it starts to get busy again with the Worlds in Porto and through to October is October's Saint-Tropez, which, boy, have they spent a long time deciding how they're going to organise that, whether it's 1 week, 2 weeks, and which weeks they are. But I think we're finally there.
Isn't that a 2-week event with?
No, it's been compressed.
Oh, it has, back to 1 week, because it was forever 1 week, and then it was 2 weeks last year, the last couple of years.
Didn't work.
Yeah.
We said it wouldn't work, and it didn't.
Yeah.
It took a lot of the buzz out of the place.
Well, Stingray, if you're going, I would go to Porto Cervo if I had a bucket list. Several of them are Jody saying my bucket list is to do the Rolex Maxi Cup. Yeah, you do the Maxi Cup in Porto Cervo. Yacht Club Costa Smeralda, absolutely. They're talking back.
I went to Milan for their sort of annual press conference announcement of their season last week on Tuesday. This week.
Rick Bannerow is saying, okay, COVID, recycling, snorting. What? He didn't say that, but I added that in. What's next? A discussion on Meghan Markle. I won't ask you about Meghan Markle. And I want to know who Prince Harry is sitting behind at the coronation. We'll have to ask Pindar. Andrew probably knows. We are going to get a report from Andrew Pindar on the coronation. He's going to come on the show or at least give us a recorded something before the coronation on, what is that, Saturday the 6th of May? Is that when that is?
Yeah.
And did you tell me tell Julie and myself in the pre-check and the pre-show Tech check that there's a watch party at the squadron
Yes.
to watch the coronation.
They're going to have a big television and a lunch and general hoorah.
That sounds like fun. I don't think we'll have a watch party here because that's pretty early in the morning for us, but nonetheless, one last question, Andrew, and then we'll let you go because we got to cover Con Cup and a couple other things. But we had you here for an hour and 40 minutes now. If you're just joining, thank you. A lot of people.
I've finished packing.
You got to pack to go fly tomorrow, but closing in on 1500, 3 o'clock here in San Francisco, which would be the 2-hour mark for our show. Have to ask you this question, and that is, there was a question asked by somebody else. How are you doing on harmonizing, to use a good a favorite word in Europe, harmonizing the rating rules?
Yes. I did see my friend Bruno Finzi in Milan. We both have the same goal, but we aren't getting there. They're almost going diametrically opposite. We still, in Maxis, we're using IRC because it's simple, single number, and people know where they are with it. I understand the principle of the full-on ORC, which is to try and make it fairest for every boat in all conditions, because there's always the feeling that some boats could go better in light weather, some boats only go well downwind, and you've got to you can allow for that. And the latest is not just to allow round an inshore course, but also to put the sort of weather routing information into the formula so that you allow for a race when there's more wind at one end of the course than another. Because, well, we get it just in day racing and often in the Mediterranean, where the wind builds up during the afternoon but then dies, and depending on how long the race goes on, it might give the smaller boats more wind and bring them up to the big boats because the wind started light and built, or it might die, and the reverse happens. So, it's very difficult to make a fair course for everybody. Now, if you use the ORCI formula, you can correct for everything in theory, but it means you haven't the foggiest clue of how you're doing against anybody else, because you are racing against your own boat's theoretical perfect performance. You're not racing other people. And so you only know the result some considerable time after you've arrived back at the dock.
Yeah, that's all. We were talking about that yesterday, weren't we?
Most people like that.
Now, most people want to know. They want, especially this day and age, they want instant gratification. They want to know immediately that where you are against the fleet. You can tell at each turning mark what your delta
you want
is.
To know the turning mark. You think, well, look, I'm 10 boat lengths ahead of Joe, who I usually can beat, but as long as I stay at least 10 this far ahead of him, and you get used to it.
Yeah.
And you can't do that with this super maths. So it's fine for the purists and it's fine for the techies, but it's not fine for the punters. So I'm still happy with the keep it stupid simple IRC system, although it has its problems because we're designing its all rules type form over a while, and the theory of IRC being secret was that it wouldn't type form. And it has type formed into some pretty hideous, peculiar looking. French cars look pretty odd. Well, French boats are even weirder. And I think they're pig ugly.
You heard it here first on Sailing Illustrated. You think French cars are ugly? What about French boats?
I'm going sailing with one of the senior guys from UNCL in the Caribbean tomorrow. So luckily he won't have seen this program.
You can discuss it with him.
Not Chris Otorowski.
No, this is UNCL.
Oh, UNCL.
Philippe Serrano. It's the Union Nationale de Course au Large, which is now merged with the Yacht Club de France, but that's another story.
James Frederick Bland saying, "Preach it, Andrew." I don't think you're preaching. I think you're just giving us your best advice, and it is always appreciated, even whether or not you're preaching. Julia, any final questions for Andrew?
No, I just have a comment. I'm forever impressed with his knowledge of details of anything we've ever discussed, and being right.
And I tell you what, it's even more fun to sit around a picnic table up at the Stag Cruise with some other sailors, and any topic that comes up, you
Yeah.
not only have people like Andrew, but you have a few other. I mean, you have
When
Andrew,
you have Ron Holland, Stan Honey, and all those
Yeah.
great guys.
exactly, and it's great,
It's pretty stunning.
great entertainment, and
Yeah.
and always much appreciated.
And my good friend John McNeil, we mustn't forget.
Oh, yes.
Commodore McNeil, indeed.
He orchestrated me coming both times. So my very best to him if he's watching.
He did ask that his regards be returned to you.
Indeed. So they're talking now about the 72 Citroen D. Was it fugly? Andrew, final word to you.
Beautiful old Citroens. The Maigret Citroen was fantastic.
Any final thoughts?
One.
Final
With
thoughts.
six-
You're over to you for the last wrap up.
Right. Well, just we're looking forward to a splendid season. We hope the weather behaves. And that's my biggest worry with the Mediterranean is you have too little wind or too much wind. And I'm pretty convinced that climate change is not going to make that better.
Well, apparently the current thinking here is we're going to have a mini, what do you call that? El Nino
Mhm.
out here in the Pacific, which is going to tamp down, at least the
That
reports I
suppresses the hurricanes. Yeah.
Yeah, the hurricane season. So hopefully that is the case. Andrew, thank you as always. Thank you very much. Jody Shields is saying he's the only one who can use the testicle word on this show. You need big cojones to call French boats ugly.
Oh, Jody, I can show you some pictures. Have a look at the Jeannot Sunfast 3300. It's the ugliest boat around.
We've got a slide
Hundreds of
slide at the end of the show we're dedicating to Jody Shields. I hope you can stick around to that. Andrew, thank you very much indeed. Stingray saying what an absolutely wonderful guest. Thank you so much, and I'm sure the comments will echo that through the rest of the show.
Yes, and be sure to read them on a long plane flight or something.
Indeed.
Yeah, I will tomorrow. Well, thank you very much for having me.
Ciao, thank you. Have a
you
nice rest of your evening and a safe flight tomorrow to the Caribbean.
Indeed.
Thanks very much.
Thank
Good
you.
night.
Good night. Mr. Dr. Andrew McIrvine, live via Skype from London. Always nice to have him on. We have not had him on
For a while.
for a while, so it's great to have him back. You're watching show number 610. We're an hour and 48 minutes in, and we'll get to a couple other sailing things as promised, the Bahamas and the Congressional Cup. So let's carry on with that. Speaking of the Bahamas, according to the Tribune and various other news sources, the government there has named sailing as their national sport by resolution last week. The House of Assembly passed a resolution yesterday, a couple days ago, maybe last week, naming sailing the national sport of the Bahamas. Agriculture, Marine Resources, and Family Island Affairs Minister Clay Sweeting, what a great name, moved the resolution expressing delight in what he said was a long-awaited announcement. Quote, I am so happy to be here to support this historic resolution to name sailing the national sport of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. This has been a long-awaited announcement by Bahamians far and wide, Mr. Sweeting said. So that's interesting. A little more, we have, quote, I love this. I really like this. We have witnessed the evolution. This is Mr. Sweeting, I think, continuing. We have witnessed its evolution, and it is a sport that has won the hearts of Bahamians and the millions of visitors to the Bahamas. It is a sport that subtly reminds us of who we are, that is the Bahamians, a friendly maritime people that continues to make waves internationally by sailing with vigor, as JFK would have said, with vigor and grace, the underpinnings of the Bahamian spirit. Now, Julia,
That's nice.
isn't that nice?
Mhm.
I thought that was a superb quote. Now, I have to ask you, how many other countries have designated, official national sports?
You never ask a question that you don't know the answer to.
You think? You're right. Thanks to Wikipedia, if you believe them, there are only a dozen or so countries: Argentina, Canada, Chile, Colombia, Mexico, Nepal, Philippines, Puerto Rico, South Korea, and Uruguay. Now, most of those sports that they have named as national sports, with the exception of Canada and maybe South Korea and Nepal, I guess. I don't know. Well, rodeo in Chile, that's nice.
Mhm.
But I didn't recognize any of those other sports. Pato, somebody will know what that is.
Yeah.
Tejo, charreria, sounds like horse or something. Volleyball, of course, in Nepal. Paso Fino, I've forgotten what that is. I used to know what that was. Seen it. Taekwondo, of course. And destrezas criollas, gaucho, some kind of a cowboy thing. Canada, Canada has two sports: ice hockey in the winter and lacrosse in the summer. So those are the official sports. Now you can talk about the unofficial sports in various countries, but I thought we should look into that. Now, congratulations to the Bahamas naming sailing. No other country apparently has named, Julia, sailing as their official sport. Stingray is wondering, I wonder if this Bahamian announcement has anything to do with an opening for a Sail GP team, one that has allowed only Caribbean sailors. I thought Nepal would choose archery, but volleyball? Interesting. Oh, they're working on the roof next door, Julia. You can hear that. Oh, dear. We've had, we were talking about using different microphones, something, because they're doing a re-roofing next door. They're redoing the street out front, but we'll press on here. We'll get on.
Yeah.
Well, what's happened, Julia,
Yes.
on this day in history? The 18th of April, 1906. Any idea? 06.
San Francisco earthquake.
Well done. Well done. And here's your was to be your first and only clue. Nothing to do with my new glasses, Alex Kent. But at 5:12 a.m. on this date, April 18th, 06, the coast of Northern California was struck by a major earthquake with an estimated moment magnitude. I don't know what that means. Moment magnitude, why that's different than any other magnitude, of 7.9. Do you know what that means?
I think it reached that magnitude.
Oh, I see. The carried up. It wasn't. And a maximum Mercalli intensity of 11. Roman numeral 11, which is extreme. High intensity shaking was felt from Eureka on the north coast to the Salinas Valley, an agricultural region, of course, well to the south of the Bay Area. The devastating fires soon broke out in San Francisco and lasted for several days. More than 3,000 people died, and over 80% of the city was destroyed. The event is remembered as the deadliest earthquake in the history of the U.S. The death toll remains the greatest loss of life from a natural disaster in California's history and high on the lists of American disasters. Julia, what do you think of that? Shaky day, Don Lunabos is saying, in San Francisco. What do you think?
I think what developed out of it was a city that needed to be rebuilt at the time anyway, and developed architecturally safe buildings. Led to the
much safer because of all the earthquake proofing and so on.
Worldwide, I think San Francisco's architecture from
06 on. Well, you wouldn't wish that on anybody, just to have improved seismo.
No, but I mean, we still see cities of architecture which are not paying any attention.
Well, it's true, and they probably, here's another picture. And when I prepared this segment, I usually do this day in history and the stuff about what today is. I usually do it the night before because it's not exactly breaking news. And this is that famous Arnold Genthe, I guess you pronounce it, good German name, Genthe photo looking down you know where that is, Sacramento Street, toward the fire. And the photo is famous in part, as you probably know, because not only was there the fire from the quake and gas mains and so on erupting and whatever else, but then there was a Crutonic colonel here in the Presidio, out here by us, who said, well, I'm in charge here. Who was that guy back in the Nixon administration?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
was it the Nixon administration or somebody had a problem, and it was the General Alexander Haig,
Haig,
was it?
yeah.
And he said, and he wasn't eligible to say this, but he said, well, I'm in charge here. He was the chief of staff, I think, in the White House.
Yeah.
And the same thing happened here in 06. There was some general or colonel or somebody over here who was the commander of the
Presidio.
Army base in the Presidio, which is now a park here next to us, right, literally down the street
Mhm.
to the west of us. And when the fire broke out, he said, well, I know what we'll do. No joke.
I know. We'll burn the other.
We'll set a backfire
Uh-huh.
and stop it from the fire from advancing.
Yeah.
Well, Haig during, thanks, Fog Machine, Alexander Haig, chief of staff for Reagan. So he set the backfire, forgetting that at 1 in the afternoon, the wind blows up here. This is especially even this time of year, the wind comes up. And what part of the city had not already burned, he then burned practically, the
rest of it,
the rest of it, all but 20% of the city. Crouton. You need a sailor. If he'd had a sailor on his staff, or if he had consulted one of the yacht clubs, there was San Francisco Yacht Club was around then, and St. Francis wasn't. St. Francis got spun off. Do you know what happens every year on April 18th at 05:12 in the morning?
Yes.
Have you been there for this?
Once.
The 117th anniversary today, and they repaint San Francisco's golden fire hydrant, which is at the southwest corner of Dolores Park at Church and 20th. And what's the significance of that, Julia?
That's the fire hydrant that saved whatever was saved.
That's right. It was the one that worked,
Yep.
right?
Mhm.
Magically, this one fire hydrant somehow had water and had water pressure, and they were able to tap into it. And that's why that part of the city, I guess, was largely saved from the original fire and the Crutonic colonel who set the other fire, the golden fire hydrant. And they had that ceremony this morning at 05:12. They polish fire hydrants. No, James, they polish some other things here in San Francisco, but no, just that one. They repaint it every year.
Yeah.
Is a golden fire hydrant like a golden rivet on a ship? I don't know about that. I think it's just the one that they are just so happy that it worked. Fog Machine said he used dynamite to start the fire. Even better. What a great idea.
Oh my God.
There's a lot of stuff here about Haig, Alexander Haig, and about,
Emperor Norton.
Emperor Norton. Think about what just happened Southern. Yeah, good point, Chris. Actually, terrible situation. Okay, well, that's this day in history, 1906, and our golden hydrant.
Yeah. April is a popular month for earthquake here.
So I wrap this segment up by saying, believe it or not, so I prepare the segment,
Yeah.
right? Those segments I usually do them the night before, and then I dream about the show.
And you were in an earthquake. Yeah.
No, I have dreamt last night
Yeah.
that we were sitting, God forbid it happens, that
Right.
we were sitting here on the air when the next big one hits.
Uh-huh.
Now, we don't know if the next big one's going to hit,
At all.
today, right now,
Right.
or 10 years from now, or 100 years from
Yeah.
now, when neither of us will be around. Some of the others may still be around. God forbid. Knock on wood. Okay, let's carry on here.
Alex Kent wants to know what brand your glasses are.
I tell you what, Julia, how many reading glasses have you bought? I got to go back here to my Pindar mug actually, I keep other reading glasses
Yeah.
in my James Bland will like this in my OK Dingy mug. And these are the ones I used to use, and they're 125s. They barely work. And then Julia has been buying by the box glasses that are 150, 175, I don't know.
Yeah.
But they come from China. China, as Trump said. And I tell you what, you look through them, and they work sort of, but you look through them for more than about 20 minutes and you start getting a terrible headache because the glass, which is plastic, is so awful. So I finally I finally just went to Amazon and looked. You know how you work by on Amazon. You go see what has the most number of positive ratings
right.
and likes, and these had something like 25,000 upticks or upvotes or likes.
Yeah.
So I don't know what brand they were. The most popular reading glasses readers on Amazon.
Yeah.
And I was told that the clear ones are if you're a really hipster, which I of course am not, that's the in thing. So thank you. That's so much about glasses. They're just the normal one, the normal readers.
Excuse me.
On you know, I give her this cough switch. And she can't remember to use it, Julia. But that's the glasses. I'm glad at least our friend since Cleveland, Julie Aarons likes them. Okay, let's quick comment here, and we'll wrap this up. We're more than 2 hours in. This, you know, these photos, the teams are each releasing their favorite photo of the last leg. Well, understandably, the favorite photo from Charles Drapeau. This is getting that boat repaired. Guillaume Environnement. I can't talk at all after 2 hours, but let alone French. It shows how the different skills required for a project can unite around one single goal. The sailor, like the rigger, are working hand in hand with the boat builders, and it's a nice sight. This was back in Ted Ryman's hometown in Cape Town, getting that boat ready. They sailed it across, and that was a major achievement because they will be starting this Sunday with the rest of the fleet when they leave Itajaí. In fact, all the boats are now in the water. This was an earlier photo, but they're all in the water getting ready for their, when's the in-port race? Is that Friday or Saturday? Not sure. And then they start on Sunday, this coming Sunday, the 23rd, for leg 4 up to Newport. We'll look forward to that. Any comments on any of that? How come only 2 guys have respiratory protection and the other folks don't?
They're not planning to fall overboard.
Well, they must not be grinding. I hope at least the ones that are grinding they're the guys on the kind of the far left and the far right. I hope the other guys are just maybe not grinding. I don't know. It's a good question, Clark Chapin. Are those new frames Anybody else wants to send us a mug? I sure like that Prince now King Charles mug.
Yeah.
With the 2 handles and in lieu of ears. So yeah, we have the Stingray's UNT, University of North Texas mug.
Yeah.
We have Pindar's mug.
Yep.
Where am I here?
Go on.
And this mug is from Dr. Andrew McIrvine.
Oh, good.
Those are the Burgess of the Royal Yacht, the Burgess of the Royal Yacht Squadron, and the Royal Ocean Racing Club. And his yacht name, GBR 42N, La Response.
And an old one from TFE Live.
Well, and you and I drink our coffee out of the TFE Live mugs, but the show's no longer called that, so we have to get some new ones.
We do.
Sailing Illustrated mugs. I don't know the answer to that, though, why they're not all wearing respirators. But nonetheless, favorite picture. I like the idea, and I like the start. We're not going to do a watch party. We talked about it, but we got other stuff going on Sunday. McIrvine is asking, he's watching the show still. He wants to know, we've eaten the RYS marmalade. And over here, Julia.
Yes.
Over here next to me.
Yes.
Is on the desk.
Yes.
There's a close-up of our mug, but behind that is the Royal Yacht Squadron. Remember when Andrew brought us this?
Yes.
The Royal Yacht Squadron marmalade. Seville orange.
Yeah.
Marmalade. No, we've not. We're saving it. Like the Vegemite. We can't decide whether we like Vegemite or your marmalade better, or the croutons. Right, Julia?
Right. I don't have a problem with that.
You don't have a problem with what?
Deciding.
The Vegemite? Which would you eat? You don't like Vegemite?
No. I've gone through phases of learning to like it, but
well, we need Pedro. Now back on that here in the, this. You see what this says? It says Croutonic Corner. You can see that here on. And this, of course, is from Pedro Foiling Sailor, Peter Stevenson, who's
Right.
just on. And yeah, it's hiding back here, but we've got it, Andrew, along with the D3.
Did
And
you see what he wrote?
what did who wrote? You could always eat the
Pe-
marmalade and put the empty jar back. That's James Bland. What else?
Yeah. No, Pedro said, I may have to make a new tray to hold all the mugs.
Yeah, we need a tray in the back, Peter, for the mugs. That would be. We got some kitchen from the grill room. We've got this woven pad, which is croutonic. Much rather have his. Okay, let's carry on here. We got to get to the last leg and get this one wrapped up.
Yes.
We're an hour and 6 minutes in. The last leg, the promised update and preview of the update from and preview of the Congressional Cup coming up. First of all, bravo Zulu to Christopher Weiss, and I've misspelled his name. The graphics department screwed up. That is Weiss with a single S. And I know Chris from Governor's Cup, and his team won the Ficker Cup. Ficker is quicker. Chris representing the Delray Yacht Club up in L.A., and he had an epic race in his semifinal against our foesy Jeffrey Peterson, with whom I spoke this morning.
Oh, yes. And
I'll tell you in a moment. In a stunning upset, Chris Weiss ousted Jeffrey Peterson, who had been undefeated going into the semis, in the Ficker Cup semifinals today. This was a couple days ago, and advanced to the finals against Megan Thompson. Now, there is a really good up-and-coming and already good sailor from New Zealand, women's national champion at least once, maybe twice in New Zealand, going on to capture his first Ficker Cup title. Both Weiss and Thompson, who was the other finalist, have moved on to the Congressional Cup Grade 1 Match Race Championship, which starts today, Tuesday the 18th. Peterson defeated Nicole Briot in the Petit Finale, the consolation, and took third and fourth, respectively. Nicole, of course, here from St.
I
Francis
was going
Yacht
to say,
Club.
I'm cheering for both of them.
Yeah, it was a good gal. Now, here was the interesting thing that happened. I talked to Jeffrey, and I asked Dave Perry about this morning as well. So going into the semifinals, as you know, the deal is that the winner can pick, this is tradition in match racing, pick which of the other three teams you will race in your semifinal. So if you're 14-0, as Jeffrey was, would you pick the 9-5 Chris Weiss, the 9-5 Nicole Briot, or the 6-8 Megan Thompson? Which would you choose, Julia?
I'd have a bit more information before I did that.
And what? What would that information? Oh, I mean, that's a fair comment. What would you choose and why?
Well, it depends on how close the races were and what kind of weather it was and who was,
Exactly. And that's what Jeffrey said this morning. And very rarely does anyone choose the second place team.
Right.
And I said, Jeffrey, was this your ego coming through? Or are you just going to choose him and then crush him? Say, we're going to get rid of you now. We think we can beat you. And he said, no, we had good races against him in the rounds robin. They felt he was less of a threat. Jeffrey said he thought Chris Weiss was less of a threat than Nicole or Megan. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And I've seen this before. I've asked Dave Perry about it. I've talked to Andy Rose, not recently, but we've talked about it in the past. And we've seen this movie before, and I guarantee you, for whatever reason, whenever the first place team chooses someone other than the fourth place team, it comes back to bite you in the proverbial behind.
Mm.
So Jeffrey picked Christopher, and then Christopher picked him in the semis and went on then to beat Megan Thompson in the final, Megan having beaten Nicole Briot in the other. It was very close, very good racing. It was kind of light. And as Dave Perry said this morning, remember when I was talking with him on the phone about his birthday and the other stuff that at the top of the show, he said, remember the Congressional Cup and those big, heavy Catalina, 37s, it's all about the start. If you win the start and you're just at least as fast or a click faster, you're almost certainly going to win those races, assuming you have equally good boat handling, yada, yada.
Mm-hmm.
So it was light and very close racing. And indeed, whoever won the start won the races for the most part. This is another Fozy. You know who that is on the right?
No.
She watches every show, almost, if not live with her husband at night in replay. That is Bill Ficker's daughter,
Oh yeah.
Dion Ficker McDonald.
Right.
Terrific night, one of the nicest people in the sport. Newport Harbor Yacht Club giving the Ficker Cup, her late great dad, who won the America's Cup in 1970. Ficker is quicker. That was the slogan from that. Chris Weiss won, Megan Thompson second, losing in the finals. Jeffrey beat Nicole in the Petit Finale, the consolation. So he was third, Nicole fourth. And good sailors. I mean, Pearson Potts, Peter Holtz, Dave Hood. I don't know Ruairi Finnegan from Ireland. Don't know. I'm sure I didn't pronounce that correctly. I don't know the others, but for a Ficker Cup, usually it's the competition's a little thin. Well, this was heavy duty stuff. Good regatta, and therefore Christopher and Megan, because the top two teams then get slots into the Congressional Cup, which, as we said, the granddaddy of them all, starts today, hosted by Long Beach Yacht Club. This is the 58th edition, and I won't name all those folks, but it's an all-volunteer effort, or almost all-volunteer effort. Regatta chair Bob Piercy on the left, front left, and front right is Commodore Blair Carty. It's a fabulous club that runs year after year with 300 plus volunteers. Just a fabulous event, and I used to be on the jury there and carried on, as Dave Perry remembered. And Bravo Zulu to them. Bravo Zulu also to the 10 skippers. This no Taylor Canfield. We thought Taylor was going to be there when I was talking with Jeffrey this morning, because I asked Jeffrey who, and I'm going to ask all of you who you think's going to win. Put in the comments. But Jeffrey was saying he thought Taylor Canfield, but Taylor's not in the field, nor is he's not in the field. So Jeppe Borsche from Denmark, Nick Egnott Johnson from New Zealand, Dave Hood, who's the local rep. There's always a rep from Long Beach Yacht Club who has to win a runoff there. Chris Poole, who's doing very, very well, one of the top ranked on the World Match Racing Tour. Harry Price, another Fozy favorite, as is Nick E.J. Great sailors, all that whole top row, and then it arguably gets even stronger in the bottom. Joni Berenson from Sweden, Johnny, they call him. He has been a Congressional Cup favorite forever. Eric Monine. Ian Williams, who won it last year and has won it I don't know how many times by now, but is probably most people's not only sentimental favorite, but probably a favorite going in. I'm going to hope for Megan Thompson. She did well in these same boats. They're racing the Cat 37s, and I hope to see Megan do well. She's the only female lady skipper, and Chris Weiss, who beat her in the finals of the Ficker Cup. Jody Shields, who is partial to Australians, is saying that Harry will win it. Gordon Smith says Ian Williams or Jeppe Borsche. And, of course, Gordon, living in Denmark, might say that. Ian Williams gets my bet. Stingray is saying, amazing is other. Okay, Stingray, we're not talking about golden showers. Julia, give Stingray just a token wag of the finger. He's talking about not golden fire plugs, but he's talking about golden showers. Bad Stingray. It's funny, though. Who's your guess, Julia, of these 10 superb skippers?
Oh, I have no idea.
You don't want to guess?
I don't, but just for fun, I'll say Megan Thompson, just to give her a... Good. I mean, I love 3 of those guys.
Excuse me, I've got a bit of a... But I turned my mic off.
Yeah.
I'm going to go with Jody. I think this is Harry. I think there's going to be a change. I think Ian Williams. Ian, you're too old. I think Ian Williams is gone. I think Yanni Berenson, who's a great guy and is always in the top, I don't think he's going to do it. My guess is that it is, and he's having a great year. I'm going to say that either Chris Poole or Harry Price there in the upper right corner, and I just for fun will go with Harry Price. I will go with Harry Price. And you're going with Megan.
Yep.
Lots of others are going with Ian Williams. Female lady, that is certain to provoke a debate. Sorry, Gordon. She is a female, and she's also a lady. You can be both.
Absolutely.
You can be a female and not be a lady.
Yes.
And you can be a female and not be a female.
I'm not getting it.
Oh, we're getting into it when we get into the comment. We got more good jokes and comments here in the finals. Okay, Alistair Murray's with Jody and me. His money is on Harry. Jody says, if Harry doesn't win, if you can buy me a ticket to Sail GP Grand Finale in San Francisco, and I'll buy you a beer.
Great trade.
Sangmeister, and John knows, he follows this because his kids are sailing in this circuit as well, and good sailors they are. Poole and Williams will be the final, John is saying, and he may well be right. And Chris Poole, he's highly ranked, he's doing very well, he's consistent on the circuit, he's a regular on the circuit. Nick E.J. probably should not be overlooked either. The granddaddy of them all, the 58th Congressional Cup taking place today through Sunday. Is it Sunday or Saturday? Ted Ryman is going with Williams. Traditionally, the winner is on the skipper's list. What? The skip? Okay. Okay. I didn't quite get that comment. The 58th edition of the Congressional Cup is starting today and runs through either Saturday night or Sunday. It used to run through Sunday. Is it back? Is it over now on Saturday night? Somebody will tell me. Thank you for that. That gets us to that was the last leg, so this is the finish line with that great photo from Davis Island Yacht Club, courtesy of Bill Wingrove. And now, Julia, we have a record number
we do.
Of jokes. I complained in the last show about not having any jokes and people not sending us any of these jokes. Well, today, as you're about to see, in Whiskey Tango Fox, get your finger ready because we got a couple of finger waggers. Here's the first one. I don't always drink beer, the famous gentleman says, the most famous man in the world. But when I do, you know what gender I am. The Bud Light thing, the trans lady, gentleman who's... Come on, that was funny.
Yeah.
You don't think so?
Yeah.
Oh, I thought that was really... And I thought you would like that one, too.
Well.
Okay, related but different. Testicular injuries, this we dedicate to Jody. There's two in here that we dedicate to Jody. Testicular injuries among female athletes. Flat line until recently. And it's gone straight north. It's gone flat line, and then here in the last 5 years, Jody will like that, right?
Yeah.
Gordon Smith liked that. You are welcome, Rick Banner. Did you send that to? Several people sent that to me. I usually put the name, and you know what? I have Rick Bannero's name up there in the corner. And I always put the name if it's only one, but if more than one of you sent it to me, then I will I'll just give it a generic. How did you meet your husband? I'm a pharmacist. He came in to buy condoms, asked for a XXXXXL, and only after we got married, I realized he stutters. I told you we had a bunch, and they were not necessarily clean. No alcoholic beverages beyond this point, and that can is that what do you call that thing? That cooler thing is going over the Busch Light, not the Bud Light, saying I identify as a soda. That courtesy of Ted Ryman. A koozie, thank you, Rick Banner. A koozie that's
A cozy.
a koozie that keeps it cozy.
Yeah.
I think koozie on the East Coast anyway. This is a bar, apparently, a toilet at a bar called the Jenny Bar. And if you can't see it up close, for the complimentary relief of men, women, poofs, lesbians, sheep shearers, goat lovers, women with dongly bits, men with without dongly bits, LGBTQ plus, 57 other species, genders yet to be discovered, strange people wearing Manchester United shirts. Welcome and enjoy. Guess who that came from, Julia?
Jody.
No, that came also from Ted Ryman.
No.
Told you we had a bunch today. You can't use your switch, can you? I got to get you to use your switch.
I'm not used to it.
I know. I'm going to put that up next to your chair upstairs from now on, and you can practice it. This doesn't make sense. And add leftover wine? What the hell is leftover wine? From the 50s, right?
Yep.
That is from Martha Peterson, our
Yeah,
Fozy,
good.
who sends the best.
Yeah.
Now, you younger folks won't get this one. Do you get that one, Julia?
I
There's a cassette tape on the operating room.
Oh.
We dedicate this one to Andrew McIrvine. And the doc, the surgeon, is saying, pencil.
Just gotta wind up the tape.
Do that again with your hand.
Yeah, winding up the
I
tape.
didn't take the camera 3 quick enough to get that. Winding up the tape. Graham Sweeney sent that in. Here's one that several people sent. You've been offered a role as a husband. This is Hollywood movie mogul who's been married for 30 years. I was hoping for a speaking part.
Yes.
Did you do all the talking for Conrad, the late great your husband?
Are you kidding?
Huh? No, I know you was kidding. And finally, dedicated to our Fosey, sent by an Australian, dedicated to you, Jody Shields. This is caption contest.
Oh.
It's a caption contest sent in by Greg Phillips in Australia. And the caption that he sent was, and you think you're having a bad day. And you think you're having, oh, I have to cross my legs. Oh, that hurts. Oh, dear. I've never understood resealable wine bottles. Two if by land. Rick Panero. Any other captions before we get off this? My mother will not be amused. My
No.
beloved mother. That's pretty good, too, if by land. Missed it by that much, Bill McGravis. Julia, you're having a meltdown there. That's good. Come on, any others? That's one of those female sporting injuries. Last call for any captions for this one sent in by Greg Phillips in Australia, up in Brisbane. Okay, I don't, upon seeing no others, Julia, do you want to shake your finger at that one? You can shake that at me. I debated whether to put that.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you what, you should see. There's some that get sent in that I simply don't put in because you would not just shake your finger. You would not approve, as would any number of others who are,
Yes.
proper people.
Proper.
Unlike myself, and I'm not a proper person. But Julia, you're a witness. You can tell everybody to
Yes. Be proper.
be proper, like, follow, and share. And also, I'm just getting a text from Jeffrey Peterson. I wonder if I should read that. But he's a good sport, and we're going to get him back on here. Let me see what he's saying. I'm just getting a message from him. Let's see what he's saying here. I didn't even realize Taylor isn't sailing. My money is on Ian, but Chris will be. Okay, so that's a text from JDP, Jeffrey Peterson, who is, I love him like a son. He's a terrific guy and a good sport. I had a long talk with him this morning, Julia.
Mm-hmm.
And he's saying, my money is on Ian Williams, but Chris will be strong as well. So he's agreeing with some of you as well. Thanks, Jeff. Thank you for that. I didn't know he was watching the show, but good that he is. Comments are welcome, even in replay. I wonder if I can get Jeffrey to come on Friday and comment about some. Jeffrey, if you're watching right now, I was thinking either get you and or Dave Perry to come on. We won't get any of the sailors. But if you're, you've got school, he's got, he's very busy. He's at Georgetown University. And when I talked to him this morning, he was just leaving class, having been in class all morning, flying back from and in class, and then he's going out to the marina where Georgetown practices on the Potomac, in your former stomping grounds, for the Georgetown sailing team. So, Jeffrey, thank you for that. And I will wrap this up. I just want to say thanks to everybody who does contribute a buck or two or more to us each month. Ted Ryman is saying it was a ballsy show. Thanks, everyone. Everyone, including, excuse me, Julie, I need to use my cough switch.
Yes.
Thanks, everyone. Please become a patron, patreon.com/join/sailing illustrated. And thank you to everybody, all of you who not only watch, but who give us images, video, and audio for these shows. Julia, final thoughts.
We very much appreciate what Fosies do for us.
We do. And the Fosies, the patrons. But again, we are most appreciative because I not only do they send us jokes, you all send us jokes, And not only do you want, we just do this for you. We don't do this for our own edification. It's too much work. But I like that theme from, we're hopefully changing lives, giving people a little bit of fun, edutainment. Edutainment. And when you get great guests on like Andrew McIrvine.
I can listen to him all day.
Yeah, terrific stuff. Thanks, everybody. Thank you for that. And we hope to see you on Friday. We'll see if we get Jeffrey Peterson on here to comment about what's going on. In the meantime, have a great rest of your week. Sail fast, sail safe, have fun. Ciao for now.